Welcome to Ecologic for the month of May 24. Hurricane looming out there in the Atlantic. Hope it doesn't head this way. Uh, Beautiful time of the year. Tonight's subject is the history of our electrical generation system in Lafayette and where we are today and the plans going forward. Lafayette, the history starts in 1897 when Lafayette is home to the Southern Pacific Rail Yard. The rail yard maintained the steam trains. The steam trains came through Lafayette. Besides numerous cargo trains, there were 12 passenger trains a day into Lafayette, 6 that came from Houston to New Orleans, and 6 that went from New Orleans to Houston. So this is kind of the center of town, right where we are now. The old train passenger depot was right next to the building right here, and where the current bus station is now. And so the biggest economic activity in Lafayette in the 1890s was the power plant. If we look at this, the census of 1870 in Lafayette is about 700, it was a millionville at the time, about 770 people. The census of 1890 was 2,200 people, and the census of 1900 was 3,200 people. So Lafayette was starting to grow. And contributing to that growth, of course, was the rail yard. The rail yard needed lots of electricity because the parts in the steam trains were not common parts. They were all handmade, which took a lot of blacksmith and people who operate lathes and machinists, and to make each individual part, copying the old part that was taken off the train during repair. So enormous need for electricity. So with that need, Lafayette was told at that period that it would take 20 to 30 years for Lafayette to get electricity. Well, that wouldn't work very well for the railroad and maintaining all the trains coming in and overhauling the trains. The roundhouse is a place where they could overhaul 10 or 12 trains at one time. And that was the requirement for enormous electrical needs. And to accommodate that need, Lafayette, with the cooperation of the railroad, set up the Grant Street Power Plant. 1897 started generating 98 megawatts. Now, the average home will use 1 megawatt, that's 1,000 kilowatts. And for definition, a kilowatt is 10 100 watt light bulbs running for an hour. That's our basis of measurement. So here we had an enormous power plant, relatively large, according to the need and the population. With 3,000 people in town, you didn't need very much of electricity. But the fact we had electricity was a major factor in deciding where the state would build a college. And Opelousas and New Iberia and Abbeville and Crowley and all the surrounding towns were trying to get to college. But because Lafayette was the only community in this sector that had power, Lafayette was selected. And of course, that meant a lot of growth for Lafayette. Students would come to Lafayette, they'd be educated, and our main function and main emphasis in the late 1890s was agriculture. So this was somewhat an agricultural school. It was also training for cadet training for ROTC. That was a major factor. So Lafayette met that need with the power generation station in Grant, the Grant Power Station. And the Grant station was fueled with the same fuel that powered the steam-driven trains. That was number 6 bunker oil. And the big threat to that fuel supply was it was all rail delivered. So if there's a rail strike, you could be, if your fuel supply would be cut off and you would black out the community. So to deal with that, they kept 6 tank cars on a side rail at the Grand Street Power Plant. In addition to that, they had the equivalent of about 10 tank cars in an underground storage tank, concrete, big concrete underground tank under the Grand Street site. And that big concrete facility is still there. And the problem was with that swimming pool type tank, which gave us 30 days supply of fuel that would hopefully accommodate any strike, the pool leaked. That same fuel was used by the Hyman department store, and it has the same problem. They stored the fuel for heating mainly in an underground tank that's still under the old Hyman Center downtown. It leaked, and that was never dealt with, and Lafayette acquired that old Hyman department store for the current nature station, I guess that replaced the old station by the Lafayette General Hospital. So with the generation came a problem that's still with us and still is a threat to our drinking water. But Grand Street Power Plant, for many years, operated from 1897 to 1993, 98 megawatts. Now, Lafayette started to grow. The university was a big factor. Lafayette was a training ground during World War II for pilots. And that brought many pilot training cadets into Lafayette, brought a lot of people. Many of them married local girls and stayed here. Many of them became very prominent in our business community. One that comes to mind was Mike Alisi. He married a local girl. He was from Chicago, an Italian, and stayed in Lafayette and built a business in Lafayette that still is thriving today. So the fact that we had a power plant meant that we'd accommodate these needs during World War II. And it's about 1952-53 that we built the Doc Bonet power plant that used natural gas and or diesel to produce power. It was a giant plant, 340 megawatts, and with that, we're not using it anywhere near that amount. We were way oversupplied. Lafayette is a small community then, but Lafayette is continuing to grow. With hospitals coming, with the big oil boom was a big factor in growing Lafayette. And so with that growing, Lafayette is under its own leadership, and everything is being done locally. We're not bringing in electricity from any other source. We're producing all of the power we need, all the way through. And somewhere along the line, along with Doc Bonet, we built the Curtis Rotamaker plant on the corner of Pinhook and General Mouton. That's a 100 megawatt gas-fired steam plant. And that was built in the late 70s, early 80s, and only operated for a couple of years because as it's coming online, we've decided we're going through a period where most of our generation is natural gas, and natural gas got very expensive. It went from 25, 30 cents a natural gas unit to $9, $10, $12. The Tuscaloosa trend made people wealthy in our area. The oil business boomed. That was an enormous source of natural gas, and the natural gas, they were getting $9, $10 a unit, and these big gas wells made a lot of rich people, and including people that were in our area. And so, but it raised the price of electricity, and coal was lumping along. Coal was priced at a very uniform low rate, and it didn't fluctuate like like gas. So I guess the city fathers realized that we should be generating with coal because it was low cost and it was stable in price. So with that, we made our first step away from self-generation. LUS bought half interest in the Rodemaker 2 power plant in Boyce, Louisiana, run by CLECO, operated by CLECO. 520 megawatt, which gave us about 260 megawatts of power. And the issue with that were many. For the first time, we are paying transmission fees. The problem with the coal plant is over 100 miles away. So you got to send it over 100 miles, which is expensive. It's expensive in terms of what lines you have to use, the cost of those lines, the transformers that have to be used. The power has to be transformed up to very high voltage, hundreds of thousands of volts to be shipped over lines, and then it has to be transformed down, and all of those transformers are in operation, cost money, and so now we're paying transmission fees. We're also paying to haul the coal. The coal is coming from Gillette, Wyoming, about 1,510 miles from the plant. Now, 1,500 miles of that is one line, one rail line. BNSF delivers to Alexandria. That costs about $1.8 million a year to haul that coal. Now, the plant, which has half hours, needs 120 coal cars a day. So that's an enormous logistic challenge to get that delivered. So that coal is being sent all the way across the country. Now, when it gets to Alexandria, it's taken over by another rail line, and it has to move it about 9 or 10 miles up the Red River on the west side. That line is an area a line that is not regulated. It can charge any fee they want to charge. So for those 9 or 10 miles, Lafayette and CLECO is being charged like $6.8 million a year. And so our total for the whole operation, is almost about $9 million a year. Of that, half of it is Lafayette. Now, along with that, we have to provide the coal cars. And so Lafayette owns about $50 million worth of coal cars. The rail company just pulls the cars. They don't own or provide the cars. The end user has to provide it, which we provided. So we got all these costs coming in. And then we have to deal with things like mercury abatement. Coal plants emit large volumes of mercury, and that goes into the atmosphere and lands in the waters, lands into fish. It's why you have fish warnings at Henderson. You can't eat king mackerel because the level of mercury in king mackerel is so high, it's not safe to eat. All of that, nearly all of that is generated by coal plants, of which about a third of Louisiana's power is coal. A big part of it is Lafayette's and CLECO's operation. So now we have costs that are going up, up, up. CLECO is driving the bus. We're along for the ride. We just have to pay the bills as they come. $50 million worth of coal cars, $500,000 a month for the transportation fees. The biggest cost to the citizens is the transmission of the power. And using the CLECO lines, Lafayette is charged 4.5 cents a kW. We're paying 3 or 4 cents to generate. We're paying more to haul it. So all of that is contributing to raising the price. The price, back about 20 years ago, the price went from 6 cents a kW to 9 cents a kW. and so along about 2001, the transmission conglomerate MISO, which operates transmission lines from Canada to the Gulf in the central part of the country is taking over and moving electricity around. Lafayette joins MISO, and so does CLECO. So now we are essentially, for the last 20 years, buying all our power through MISO. And MISO is supposedly a nonprofit, and to be a part of MISO, you have to have generating capacity equal to what you buy. So Lafayette needs about 400 peak power, about 400 megawatts. In fact, last August we peaked at a little over 500. So there is the need. So the problem comes in that the Doc Bonan plant is inefficient. It's only 6% efficient. So it's cheaper to buy the power to MISO than it is to operate the Doc Bonan plant. So the Doc Bonan plant, at 340 megawatts, is gradually phased out. But as they phase it out, they still need that generating capacity. So to meet that capacity, we built 2 new power plants that each produce 100 megawatts for a total of 200. And they use an antiquated, obsolete, very inefficient single-cycle turbine generators. The GE Frame 5 units were essentially the aircraft engines that were being taken off the 747 that was being replaced by much more efficient engines. These engines are about 8% efficient, and the new engines being put on the 747s were about 30% efficient. So they became obsolete. So GE married these old units to generators at 50 megawatts each, and sold them to communities like Lafayette that probably at this time, had very efficient management, but made a very poor decision. In fact, that these plants are only peaking plants. They only run at 2 or 3% of the time. Now that peak need is important, and of course, it also accommodates the requirement for buying all our power from MISO. That requirement is that we have to have the generating capacity available, even though it may not be used, but very, very seldom, maybe 1 or 2% of the time to super peak need. So that's where we stand now. We have the coal-fired plant up in Boyce is putting out about 260 megawatts. We have another 200 megawatts of peak power with the old GE Frame 5 4 generators. and so we currently meet the need. Now, when federal government has stepped in, we got to close the coal plant in about 3 years. So that generation, to stay in MISO, we have to build additional generating capacity. And the plan going forward is to build a Siemens 5000 generating single cycle 240 megawatt unit at the old Doc Bonan plant. And that allows us to maintain purchase of all our power through the MISO. We still are dealing with, even when we close the coal plant, it has to be cleaned up and phased out, the plant itself. So Duke Energy, according to Wall Street Journal, closed 10 of these plants in North Carolina, similar size to ours, at a cost of $12 billion. So look at, when the plant is closed, we have to clean up 4 major sectors. One, the plant itself has to be demolished and cleaned up. Where we've been storing the coal for the last 42 years has to be cleaned up because it's a highly contaminated site. It has radioactive materials like radon and a whole bunch of radium and uranium and so forth. Nobody takes that out of the coal as you put it in the cars. So all of that creates a hazardous site. We have a dump pond where a portion of the waste from the coal generation is dumped into the pond. And then we have a solid waste land site. So the waste from the coal goes into 3 different places. One is the pond, one's a solid waste, and it ends up in concrete. The coal ash, a portion of the coal ash can be added to concrete, which makes concrete stronger over time and works great for parking lots and for highways, but probably should never put in occupied buildings because it now brings in the subject of radon contamination. So getting rid of the coal plant, we still will be married to paying for cleaning it up. Our share of that is about $600 million, and we don't have a dime set aside to deal with it. All that points to higher costs. The new plant that's being planned is a $400 million project. It will only run 870 hours a year because to run it more, we'd have to deal with carbon emissions, carbon sequestration. We have an air pollution problem. The Siemens 5000 they intend to use is only about 25% efficient without chillers. They had planned to use chillers. That's been abandoned. The chillers cost more than you get. The chillers have to operate anytime the air temperature is above 50 degrees, which means it operates nearly all the time, and it uses 2 megawatts per hour. And you only get about 14 more megawatts out of 870 hours. So you have a net loss operating the chillers over the years. It'll be a lot more efficient not to operate. So that portion of the plan has been abandoned. The equipment itself is antiquated. It's obsolete when we put it in. Single cycle units are not efficient. The alternative is combined cycle. And the modern combined cycles go from 25% efficiency to 63% efficiency. And the modern units not only can run on diesel fuel, J fuel, they can run on natural gas, or they can run on a combination of natural gas, hydrogen, or hydrogen alone. Now, that's the best available technology. That's where we should be going, what we're using. Big question, who pays for it? The current plan is to allow you, the user, to pay for the new power plant. The Parish Council just approved a $400 million commitment. And the problem with $400 million is it won't begin to cover the bill of retiring the old coal plant. That coal plant is a 10-year operation. We'll be paying hundreds of millions of dollars to clean it up, and we will not be getting electricity from it. What does that mean for you and I? It means much higher rates. If just doing the math, $400 million, we still have $70 million in bonds that are not paid for, tied to the new power plants that we built in 2008. And the A-Bear plant and I forgot the name of the other. So we're going to have a total of $500 million in bond indebtedness. If you just look at that, you need 1% to pay off the bonds and to pay the interest, you need 1% a month. So we're going to need $5 million a month, $60 million a year that will come out of your pocket. All that means is much higher rates. The initial raise of the rates is 1 cent. We've gone from 9 to 10 cents. It's bad news for businesses. Businesses pay much higher rate than you do at your home. At your home, you pay for straight power. The business have to pay peak demand. What that means is peak demand rates is they charge you whatever you use, the most you use in 15 minutes of a month is the rate that you are charged all month. And so that puts the, right now, 11 cents rate for commercial. It puts it at actual 25, 28 cents a kW, which puts our power costs in Lafayette for commercial businesses about the same as New York or California. And so that's a big negative in terms of businesses for Lafayette. Now, what are the options? If you look at going forward, we're dealing with something that is going to be a path forward for Lafayette for the next 3 or 4 decades. As the coal plant, we've been operating it for 42 years. We could have easily done without buying the coal plant. We had enough generating capacity at Doc Bonet and Curtis Road to make it operate. So it probably was not a wise investment to buy the coal plant. And we still married to it. And, we're not running that plant. CLECO's running the plant. It takes 270 people to operate that plant, not one of them from Lafayette. And so CLECO's driving the bus, and we just paying for the fuel, we're paying for the repairs, we're paying for the tires, and we're not calling the shots. We just getting the bills that we have to pay. And so our current plan forward is totally, as we have been for the last 20 years, to buy all of our power off the grid through MISO. And MISO operates, they mine coal power, they mine whatever power they can, whatever becomes available. The problem with that is it's a 1-hour spot market. The price changes every hour. They cannot tell you a month from now what the price of that power will be. And the demands for power is going up, up, up as we bring in more and more electric cars. The amazing, to drive an electric car, to charge it takes 120 kW. Now, the typical home is using a little more than a kW an hour. Uses about 30 kW a 24-hour day. And so the power it takes to charge a electric car, a Tesla for instance, is 120 kW. That'll run about 105 homes for an hour. We have, for every person in our population, we have a car. Lafayette Parish has about 200,000 cars or 250,000 cars rolling around, cars and light trucks. If 10% of those cars in 3 or 4 years are electric, we almost double our demand for power. And this current plant won't accommodate that need. We'll be buying from MISO, and as that demand goes up, the price of the power goes up. And it'll go up where we can look at 4 or 5 years down the road, AI installations, automatic intelligence comes in. They require enormous electrical power needs. The electric cars will take more and more. We got electric cars, we got electric lawnmowers, we got electric, you name it, but they all have to be powered. And so low-cost electric cars are coming. The BYD Chinese little Seagull car will be built in Mexico. It won't be subject to tariffs. It's a plug-in electric. It's $10,000. And it's a car about the size of a Prius. And the difference between a hybrid electric and a plug-in is this. A plug-in has a battery and electric motor. The battery operates the electric motor, and you plug it into whatever and charge it, and it runs 80 miles. The little Seagull runs 80 miles in summertime. And once the battery runs out, you go to only gasoline. And it's got a small 3-cylinder gasoline engine that'll run about 40 miles a gallon, got about 10 gallons. So you got about 500-mile range on this little car. But it's either going to be running or it's going to be plugged in. So the need for electricity is going to skyrocket. A low-cost electric car will put an enormous demand on our electrical grid, and it takes 5 to 10 years to build electric generating capacity, and we're not building it. What we're dealing with MISO will probably accommodate us But as the use goes up in our community, the demand for additional power will come in. MISO, to be a part of MISO, it costs us to build those 2 power plants in 2008. That was part of MISO compliance. That cost about $200 million, of which we still owe about $70 million. So, is there a better alternative? You know, one of the things that's come up across the country to meet this fast-growing electrical need is what we call a merchant power plant. Merchant power plant is this. Instead of we paying for Doc Bonin, a merchant power plant comes in, they build a new Doc Bonin plant at their expense. Doesn't cost us a nickel. Our obligation is to give them a 15-year contract to buy the power at a price that could be set at one price for the whole 15 years, or it can be set based on changes in fuel costs. The most economical is probably to deal with the changes in fuel costs. Instead of borrowing $400 million, which is a big issue, in borrowing $400 million, you and I have to pay it back. But a merchant power plant, that's different. Now, the merchant power plant uses the most efficient engines available. They're going to be at 63% efficiency. A merchant power plant would lower, instead of lower the price of power in Lafayette significantly, probably about 2 or 3 cents a kW. It will, if my predictions are right, they will be able to accommodate commercial power without peak demand, which will lower the dickens out of commercial power in Lafayette. It'll cut the cost of commercial power in Lafayette by more than half. One of the big hospitals is using $300,000 worth a month is the electric bill. If we would drop peak demand commercial charges, it would go less than $100,000. For that one big hospital, that would amount to $3 or $4 million a year, which can accommodate better services, hiring more people, doing a better job. And so this plan forward should be, one, use the most efficient equipment available. We shouldn't be spending $400 million to put equipment that's obsolete when you install it. Any plan forward has to deal with lowering carbon emissions. The plan Lafayette has put forward will not lower carbon emissions, it'll increase carbon emissions. This generator costs $258 million, will only run 870 hours a year. That's a month. This is a place you don't want to go to work because you could fish 10 months out of the year and only work 1 month, a month more than a month a year. This plan going forward is very expensive. It's going to raise the dickens out of the rates to an unpredictable level. A merchant power plant, and there's one, the Magnolia plant is ready to go online shortly in Plaquemine, Louisiana, Iberville Parish. It's 650 megawatts. We probably wouldn't need one that large. There are companies that are willing to come to Lafayette and bring us a proposal. One of those companies is Calpine. There's another company, and the 2 other companies would be interested in making a proposal to Lafayette and save us $400 million and get us off the MISO train. The MISO train is an unknown forward. We have to deal with, one, keeping up with power generation as the need increases, which means having to build more power plants, and also deals with the fact that MISO has all kinds of needs that are part of their commitment. One is they have to deal with transmission upgrades. As the need goes up, they have to ship and rebuild and reaccommodate the movement of electricity. That bill comes to us. That can be $10, $20 million at a time. MISO has to study all this. A MISO study last 2 or 3 years cost $4 or $5 million. We just get the bill. We don't know what it will cost to put this new plant connected into the MISO system. That's an unknown. We don't know whether it's 2 million or 20 million or 50 million. MISO tells us and we send a bill. And that gets back to our 85 years of operating independently. When we operated independently, we didn't have rail cars, we didn't have MISO studies, we didn't have transmission costs. We pay more to move the power than buying the power. Typically, transmission costs for MISO is 4.5 cents a kW. Often we paid 3 cents or 4 cents for the power. So it costs them more to move it. All of that would go away if you had a local power plant. You'd pay no transmission fees. Look what happens in a hurricane. MISO is dependent on lines crisscrossing the state and all over. When a hurricane comes, it can knock those lines and knock out MISO. That's what our stand-up power is for, our backup power to accommodate during storms. But we probably don't have enough to run, and what we're operating is obsolete, very inefficient equipment. So going forward, we need a plan that minimizes the dependence on carbon footprint, minimizes impact on fossil fuels. No, we look at, does MISO accommodate the renewable energy? I've worked with Next Era to bring a renewable solar plant on the Shopway property in Lafayette Parish. It would be 100 megawatts. It's very low cost. The initial cost would be 2.8 cents when they were first negotiating with Lafayette 3 years ago. That price probably has risen to 4 or 5 cents, but that's delivered into our system. We're paying 4.5 cents transmission fees. So solar power into Lafayette is very beneficial because it would be long-term, low-cost, fixed price, which accommodates your market and it guarantees kind of a part of that is not subject to the changes in energy prices for coal or for natural gas. And so not only we have a solar plant right between Broadbridge and Louisiana Avenue, it's a 1,000-acre site on the Shopway property. Lafayette was willing to participate in that. They've totally backed out of the deal. It seems they don't want low-price electricity. Now, important point to make is Lafayette, you know, if you have a home in a luxury subdivision and you live in a $1 million home, you don't care much whether your bill is $50 a month or $5,000 a month. But the poor people, that electric bill is a big cost item. And so the importance of keeping the price as low as we can is super economic reality for poor people. It's super important for businesses, restaurants, all the businesses depend on electricity. I looked at one of the downtown restaurants, and that electric bill is about $5,000 a month. Now, if we took them off of peak power, that bill would go to about $1,500 a month. That's an enormous difference. That's a cost issue in closing businesses all over town. It's a cost issue in whether business comes to town. So to use the best, most efficient technology is the path forward for Lafayette. And to do it to use someone else's money via a merchant power plant is the path forward. The merchant power plants would accommodate the fact that they could get off when hydrogen becomes more available and cheaper, they'll be able to go to almost zero emissions and still maintain a super low cost. Hydrogen is fuel of the future, and any plan forward for Lafayette should include hydrogen in its energy mix. So super important that Lafayette, we as all citizens have an issue. We all have the benefits of electricity for air conditioning, for lighting, you name it, the power of this, the power of our cell phones, all of that's a very important part of going forward for Lafayette. So we hope the leaders of Lafayette give this Doc Bonan plant a second thought and look for the alternatives. The alternatives are out there. The people are willing to come and give those alternatives. Wind power will be coming. We should be accommodating wind power. Wind power is the lowest cost power we have is wind power. Next is combined cycle. The next is solar. But they all three are right around 3 cents a kW. We don't need to be paying 10 or 11 cents a kW for our power. We have a solar plant in Lafayette Parish that is coming. They're built by Next Era, one of the biggest in the whole country. It's a $170 billion facility. By the way, General Motors is about a $40 billion company. Next Era is a $170 billion company. They're willing to come to Lafayette. They also have a plant at Port Barre that's 2,500 acres, and they have one in Jefferson Davis Parish that's about 1,500 acres. So that's right around us. They're willing to sell to us, and we should be willing to buy because it's environmentally sound. A solar plant operates about 2,200 to 2,500 hours a year in this part of the world, and it's low-cost power, real low-cost power. And interesting in dealing with this is we found out that putting solar plant in the sugarcane field is probably not very good for the agricultural community, and it's not good for the economy because sugarcane is something that is at the foundation of our economic entity. It's created value. The oil man creates value. The guy hauling the salt creates value. The guy, raising rice, the guy catching shrimp and crawfish. All of that is foundation economic activity. And to take sugarcane out of production to make the electricity is an economic negative. We have to find a better place to put it. In dealing with that, we looked at putting them on the levees. And I called Tim Mott, who is the executive director of the St. Mary Levee Board, and he made the comment they didn't think they'd have a problem at all with putting solar panels on the levees. They would be on wheels. They would be moved if there was a problem on the levee, be easily, quickly moved, kind of like a pivot irrigator, and that's just a design challenge to make that happen. It can happen, should happen, and we got levees all over the state, and we should be sure that you don't put it on a levee that's threatened or challenged or that's weak. Make sure we put them where the levees are sound and secure, and there's plenty of places to do that. So, but all of that can help Lafayette and other communities lower their price of electricity. The demand for electricity can go up. Our marriage to MISO is probably a very economic, negative for Lafayette. It means much higher rates. We can not only be married to MISO, and MISO calls, it's like they driving the bus and we paying the bills, same as we are with CLECO. For 85 years, we were driving the bus, we were determining all the costs, and we operated very efficiently and met the needs of a community that grew from a population of 700 to over 100,000, with hospitals, with the universities, with all the schools, all the needs that Lafayette met with its independent, self-owned power, and we should be, as much as possible, returning to that and producing local power so we avoid transmission fees. We pay more for transmission than we pay for the electricity. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We use antiquated transformers. There are much better transformers out there as transformers wear out, and we should replace them with transformers that use a lot less power. We should produce local power. We have the Doc Bonan plant, and we have the Rotomaker plant. Both of those could be updated with modern equipment, and modern equipment will be provided by merchant power companies who set these up all over the country. The biggest one, nearest one to us, is the one at Plaquemine for Iberville Parish. That's kind of a model for us. That's a $2 billion plant, and it didn't cost Iberville Parish a nickel. They have a contract to buy the power. Their power needs are met by that plant, and that's a contract that the merchant power plant companies do. Calpine is one of the companies that are looking at coming to Lafayette. They're willing to make a presentation to this community, which we hope to set forward, and look at going forward with the most modern, environmentally sound, least costly, will accommodate our citizens of lower income levels at a much lower rate, accommodate our businesses at a much lower rate, which creates economic opportunity for the whole community. So it's very important that in this step forward, which will affect this community for the next 5 or 6 decades, that we step forward using the best technology, the most efficient technology, the technology that keeps our air clean, the technology that is the lowest cost, and that lower cost can be passed on. And it's at a cost level where we'll be able to afford to pay for the cleanup and the closing of the Rhodomaker plant, the coal plant. That has to be done. The threat is the pond that they dump all this waste into overflows into Rhodomaker Lake, which overflows right into the Red River. The Red River becomes the Chafalaya, where we pump water from the Chafalaya, and that water goes right through Lafayette via the Test Vermilion pumps. So that contamination had an enormous impact in North Carolina. It shut down the drinking water system for 3 million people. It's why Duke Energy had to close those 10 plants, because of that threat. Well, we have that same threat. And to think that we can get by with closing that facility for $10 to $20 million, as pronounced by one of the officials of LUS, that's utter nonsense. Whoever said that should get a copy of the Wall Street Journal and look at what it costs Duke to close those plants. You got to clean up the coal storage site. You got to clean up the solid waste landfill. You got to clean up the pond, and you got to clean up the plant facility itself. All highly contaminated. It's a 10-year process. Lafayette's share of that, if we're lucky, is $600 million. And so all of this comes down to we as citizens all have a voice in this. Make your concerns made to the people who are in charge. The current administration is in charge. We're going down a very expensive road, an expensive road that will close businesses, will cause people to decide, do we eat or do we keep air conditioning on? And those are tough decisions for people of lower income. Super important that we have a duty and obligation to the environment, to the consumers, that we use the most efficient, the best, the lowest cost, and the plan they're going forward with does not meet those needs. The equipment we'll be using is obsolete. You know, when we get rid, we have about, Lafayette owns about 200 coal cars, and talking to one of the elders, well, we'll sell them. I just got back from driving to Yellowstone and back and up into Montana. And when you talk about selling coal cars, you need to drive through Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and look at the thousands of coal cars stacked up on old rails all across the country. If they were saleable, they would be sold. They wouldn't be stacked up across the country, across 3 or 4 states, going to rust. So the idea that we're going to get in return on those coal cars, I think, is utter economic nonsense. We would just lose that. Natural gas, we live 25 miles from the Henry Hub. We have natural gas plants around Lake Charles, provide natural gas to countries around the world. We have the technology to bring natural gas. Is really, you have a call, let's see. You on there? See if I can get a hold of, trying to get a call coming in. You on there? Can we help you?
Yes, I can hear you now. I want to know, where is our city government? Where is our LUS on all these topics? Are they even listening? Hello?
Yes, that's a real good question. I think they're committed to this plan that I had to pay $120 million to get, this restoration of dock plan. But the main thing, they're committed to a marriage with MISO. And that marriage with MISO requires that we build a power plant that will only run 870 hours a year, and the power plant is only 25% efficient. Why should we buy a power plant that'll only run 1 month a year, spend almost $300 million for it, and is inefficient? If we need 100 megawatts, we have to crank up a 250 megawatt facility. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The marriage to MISO means enormous expenses. They drive in the bus. We're paying for the fuel. We're paying for the tires. We're paying for engine repairs and painting and so forth. And we're just along for the ride, just like we were with CLECO.
So how do we get out of that marriage?
We got out of the marriage by contracting with a merchant power plant to build the dock Bonaire at their expense, and our return is to agree to buy all of our power needs from them.
Yeah, but where does MISO, do they let us out?
I would think absolutely we can get out, absolutely. We just don't buy. We can still be a part of MISO, but we're going to buy a lot less power from them. Our main power.
Can we feed some of our excess into MISO?
Yes, absolutely. The excess needs would go into MISO. As we know, at times our power needs are low, and our generating capacity is greater than our power needs. At that time, those plants can sell to MISO or to any other one that wants to buy.
It's a no-brainer. Why are we not looking at that?
We are looking at it. I think Lafayette needs to look at this alternative seriously, receive the proposal from the companies that are willing to do it. Now, Calpine has a presence. They run the power plant in Eunice. That's a very large power plant. It's 1,200 megawatts. That's very successful. It's very efficient. It's 2.8 cents to 3 cents power. It's a combined cycle unit. And so that know-how can be brought to Lafayette, at their expense. And we'd avoid borrowing $400 million. And with it, get much lower electric rates. Much lower.
But you don't hear anybody saying that we're looking at it, that we're going to do any of that.
No, right now, nobody's looking at it as far as I know, except myself, and I hope it bring that to the attention of city officials. Because this is the most important issue facing Lafayette for the next 2 or 3 decades. It will shape our future. And whether you build a home in Lafayette or you build it in Broussard, or Abbeville, the fact that the cost of power is a major issue in determining where you put a business, where you build a home. Denver, Colorado is a good example. They charge peak demand for residential. So big subdivisions are being formed out of the city limits of Denver, so people can escape the peak demand costs. Peak demands, instead of you paying, if your bill is $400 a month, on the normal straight electrical charges. You go to peak demand, that $400 bill goes to $1,000. It multiplies your cost 2.5 times. So thank you so much for the call. That input
Okay.
is super important. Yes, very important that we as a community, everyone that pays electric bills should be a part of this decision because we're going to be paying the bills. And the plan they have now for it, those bills are going to go out the roof. You know, if you're paying $400 a month now, you can expect in 3 years you're going to be paying $800 a month. That's what the future means under this plan. Very expensive and unknown. They can't even tell you we were going to build this 250 megawatt plant, and MISO hadn't told us what it's going to cost to connect that plant into their system.
20 seconds.
So thank you for the call. But we as Lafayette need to wake up. You know, we tend to see we turn on the lights and the lights come on. We think that's all that matters. So thank you for listening. I appreciate the call coming in.